Thank you, Indraneel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bala. Pleasure to be here. Glad we could make it.
Awesome. Um, well, you're the fourth generation partner at the 80 plus year old Chitale Group. There's a lot of truth in the old saying that when it comes to family business or kingdoms in general, the first generation makes it, the second generation spends it, and the third generation blows it. So it has been true for a lot of kingdoms and companies, but Chitale is going strong, fourth generation now, and may it go strong for the generations to come. How hard was it to come back to a family business, and explain to me this whole hierarchy of partners? How does that work at Chitale?
Yes. So I think there's one way of looking at your question is that basically there's nothing written about the fourth generation. So it's a clean slate to build onto. So that is how I look at it, I would say. But I think nonetheless, credit goes to the generations before, where I think the sustainability is part of the ethos of Indian businesses. And that way, continuity is something that we always envisage. So I don't think so. We put in too much of a serious effort to think about what is this generation doing and what is that generation doing. But it is more about this idea that how do we build something better than what we inherited, and what do we keep doing towards making a positive impact in the society. And I think that way that cultural binding is something that remains constant. I think what we've been doing since first generation to fourth generation has been very different, and I think every generation has had that point where they've had to take certain pivots in terms of the business model, in terms of the operational model. And I think the mechanism to facilitate that was something that existed in the family. And that is where we stand to reap the benefits of being a fourth generation.
Oh,
And
excellent.
talking about it, I think the holding company was a partnership. And that way that continues to be a partnership. So it's essentially a mechanism where, in today's times, we function like managing directors of certain sets of businesses inside the group. But the way the structuring is done, it is all about partnership, where the idea is that everybody is contributing towards the company gainfully right from the point where how the capital is put up. So of course now the capital putting up is something that happened a lot of generations before, but nonetheless that is an idea that continues to be there, where the shareholders are not directly shareholders, but they are partners in the growth, and that way their ambition and the company's ambitions are something that we need to keep matching, and that way the returns to the partners instead of returns to the shareholders is what we try to do. But that's more or less the way it's structured.
That is also a good way to have alignment among all the partners, right? Because you are putting the company's mission first, and everyone sort of aligns and takes decisions at the best interest of the company.
So my grandfather always used to say that way, when it comes to a business with a really large number of heads, we need to be very mindful about the idea that the organization is bigger than the head that is leading it, and that way very likely to outlive the head that is leading it for whatever period of time it is. So that way we are caretakers of this legacy. It is our responsibility to manage the organization well so that it sustains the test of time and gets better for the next generations and the next owners to handle. So that is where I think the alignment of ownership and leadership is very clear, and expectations are something that is the responsibility of the managing partner to set.
Hmm. Chitale Bandhu has had a rich legacy spanning, like I mentioned, 80 plus years. And it also has a very fascinating story, really humble beginnings. Your great grandfather was not based out of any big city. Tell me a bit about how it all started. Walk us through that process, or where it is today.
So the legacy actually starts with my great grandfather, late BG Chitale. His name is still there on our oldest company, which is BG Chitale Dairy. And that way, he was the pioneer that in terms of setting up a business unit amongst the Chitale families of that generation. So he used to run a dairy farm in Satara district at one time in a town called Limb. That is where he continued to do business for a certain amount of time. But this was pre-independence in the mid 30s. And that is where he ended up losing all of his cattle and a lot of his farming in a couple of days due to a famine and some sort of disease that came at that time. So as with livestock in Indian subcontinent at that time, everything could be lost in under a day. So that is when he sort of got bankrupt. He didn't have anything to do, and he ended up. He had four children at that time and his wife. He took all of them together and sat in a train. And a random person asked him on a train that, why are you moving with your family right now, and what exactly happened? So he told him that this is how it is. I have lost my business, and I'm looking at a new place where I can set up my life, because I can't build it here. So one stranger to him suggested that why don't you go have a look at this village called Bhilodi, which was about 100 kilometers from where he used to be. It was on the banks of the Krishna River, and that way a fertile land where he could at least do farming and support his family. So he was of the opinion that, hey, looks like I have nothing else to lose. No harm checking this place out. He went there. He liked it. He liked the environment, and that is how it ended up setting up his base there. Eventually, growing up the business there. And that still continues to be the place where our family operates our dairy, also our fruit processing business there. And that way, it's come on to impact close to about 75,000 farmers. We manage over 200,000 animals through this network. And that way, we generate employment for more than 2,000 people over there. So that way, that continuity is something that that land has prospered us. And thanks to the British Railways at that time, we were able to bring the product out from a small town in Sangli to Mumbai and started as a B2B business. So multiple brands in Mumbai would buy our product and sell it under their branding.
White labeling before the time.
Yes, very much so. And this is like pre-telephony, pre-internet era, pre-electricity as well. So diesel engines used to be the case there. So what he realized is that he would not get visibility into the market at that time, sitting in a smaller village. And very often he would get cheated, saying that your quality was not great, your product was not right, it got contaminated, it got spoiled, so we're not paying you money. So he would end up giving 100 kgs but getting paid for 50 kgs. And he thought that there was something wrong. So then he asked his eldest son, late Raghunath Rao Chitale, who's my grandfather's elder brother, to come back from Gujarat, where he was working in a mill at that time, to set up a base in Mumbai and see what's actually happening in the market. In a few years, my grandfather, late Rajabhau Chitale, also joined the business, and they both realized that way, for a industry which was milk driven and where pasteurization and all of these technologies were very new, preservation of milk was not the norm. A market like Mumbai was not a great place to do business for milk, because there was no repeat customer. Everybody there was coming for business and going back, but not a stationary population. And that's where they decided to shift to Pune, which at that time was either the Oxford of the East or the pensioners' paradise. So we had a lot of young population as well as the older population, and they were stationary. So they would be good repeat buyers for the milk business. So that's how we shifted to Pune, and eventually Pune ended up becoming our headquarters. And then we've set up a few plants here as well, and in Gujarat now. And that way, if you look at it now, we probably end up creating direct employment to close to about 3,500 people. We do indirect business with more than about 500 odd distributors across 10 states in India. We do also franchising business, where we have about 80 franchisees in India. Besides that, we are exporting to about 35 plus countries. And along with that, at a backward side, we are dealing with about 75 to 80,000 farmers on a daily basis. So that way, we call ourselves as a farm to fork business, where all of these transformations have happened over the last 4 generations.
That is a remarkable story indeed. So it is quite interesting that that generation had such the intellect to understand that Pune had more of a stationary population. Bombay was, even back in the day, it had such floating population where people would just come for employment, make a life, and then maybe move out or move up the ladder. So that is quite remarkable. And today, at this day and age, when there is this whole glorification of startups, right? Especially in the media, there are stories written about software companies which have this $1 billion valuation, unicorns, and all of that. With you having an electronics and communication degree, coming back to family business, was there a lot of pressure? Because I know business would have been dinner table conversation for you guys, right? Like right from growing up. So by the time you were 21, 22, you would have known the ins and outs of this business. So did you ever think about, starting something on your own, or was coming back to family business always in your cards?
Well, I think even before I got into my engineering degree, that way the family was pretty well invested into the idea that he needs to get back into the family business. So whether you spend some time abroad, you do your education, you get some work experience, do what you want, but eventually this is where you have to end up. So that way, I think the exposure to the business and, as you said, the dinner time conversations was a good enough, inclination to be built, that hey, we are doing something good, this is worth spending time into, and that way it's something that I would like to commit myself to building forward whatever has been happening before. So I don't think so it ever crossed my mind at that time that I should be doing something else or trying something else out. It was just about how competent would we be to lead this business, and how do we build that competency is something that we focused on to.
Fantastic. So Chitale Bandhu, I live in the US. The most famous product is, or sort of the hero product of Chitale Bandhu is the Bakarwadi. And I hear that Bakarwadi is not actually a Maharashtrian delicacy. Tell me more about how Chitale Bandhu, Bakarwadis are standing out, when even though it is not a Maharashtrian product.
Well, so I think for us to stand out, it took about 50 years. So this was in the 70s that we got to know about Bakarwadi as a product. But it was something which is of Gujarati origin. It continues to be a Gujarati product typically. The version that we make is something which is more of a Maharashtrian adaptation of that product, but something that ends up selling a lot more. So the credit, I think, goes to this one cook at that time who my grandfather came across, and he showed them the Gujarati version of Bakarwadi. My grandfather was pretty impressed with the product, but he thought that it was maybe a little too sweet for the Maharashtrian palate. So he tried to infuse it with a little more Maharashtrian touch amidst it, and I think that ended up creating wonders. So eventually, by the 80s, we sort of figured out how to make that product better and get a good enough repeat customer. And then there was a time when Bakarwadi Sampli was quite a norm or rage in Pune. This was before viral as a word came into the picture. But I think sometimes shortage would be the right marketing strategy is what we realized. But we also realized that if we don't scale up faster, we'll lose market share, or we'll lose category share to somebody else. So that's when in the 90s we automated that, and eventually now probably at one time we would do 300 kgs a day, we probably do 2000 kgs an hour now, and that's how the scale up for that product has been.
Did he think about maybe another Maharashtrian dish that he could find similarities with when he wanted to innovate Bakarwadi? Because it is very unique in the sense it's spicy, it is a little sweet, but at the same time it is tangy, it is deep fried. Did it take a lot of iterations, or did he inspire from some Maharashtrian delicacy to come up with this unique recipe?
So this is my thesis, but I think it's something that I have not faced resistance inside the family, so partially can be true. But in Maharashtra, we have a place called Nagpur, and Nagpur is known for a very, very typical dish called Pudachi Vadi. So Pudachi Vadi is very similar in shape to what the Bakarwadi that we make, but it is shallow fried and it is extremely spicy. In comparison, the Gujarati variant was a little more elongated, the way I see it right now, more like an ellipsoid shape, but similar like a circle and circle type of a pattern, but sweeter and tangier one. So I think the fusion of the two is what sort of we sought. And if you look at it, Gujarat is one way, Nagpur is the other way, and we were right in the middle. So probably that is how the inspiration came. But maybe that's about it.
That kind of makes sense, when you think about it. Yeah, I have not tried the Gujarati version of Bakarwadi, nor the Vidarbh snack that you were mentioning, but kind of makes sense.
Correct.
Okay, great. So, there are so many snack players in India, and especially when you're looking at the export market, the labeling is usually the tag traditional, right? Like how your grandmother would make it, etc. So when when the adoption of mechanization became more and more prominent, did you also look at exploring or maybe coming up with snacks that are not traditional, and then it became a hit? Do you have any examples to say?
Well, so we are living in the middle of this expansion right now. And that way, I would say the inspiration of it is something that came from a few American friends of mine and my sister, who used to live in the US. So we make a product called Binge Bar, and that's something that was launched about a year and a half ago, and it's just started reaching the American shores maybe since February this year. So the idea behind it was that we realized that bar as a concept was something that was far more accepted across the world. And unfortunately or fortunately, the segment in the bar market was all sweet and extremely high on sugar, and very often chewy, not crispy. So my sister had a friend who was very fond of our cornflakes chowder, and he would end up eating cornflakes because Americans knew what cornflakes was. They were just like, this is a spicy cornflakes mixture. So out of that came the idea that, hey, the this idea resonates well with the Western world, and there is a possibility that if we are able to make this into a bar, what would happen? Because that is where the form factor makes it easy for other people from other cultures to understand and adopt. So could we do that? And that is when we started taking trials. And we made a cornflakes chowder bar. Then we made a special chowder bar. Then we made a bhed bar. Then we have a upwas chowder bar. We have a lemon bhed bar, and so many variants now. Where we are now, in about a month's time, we'll be setting up a line which will be making about 1,200 bars a minute, and be ready to ship across the world. So that way, this as a segment was something that we've seen as something that adopted more from a westernized idea, but amalgamated with more of an Indian fusional spicy mixes, and marketed in a form factor and a branding which is more appealing to a younger set of audience who are not naturally attuned or only accepting of Indian products, but they are okay with a more westernized branding of Indian products. And we seem to be getting a good response to it, and we are only getting started, is what I would say.
You mentioned about increasing productivity, increasing units per hour. You mentioned about how Bakarwadi scaled up. A lot of the times when you are setting up an industry of this scale, the machines are coming from Germany, Belgium, Italy. I know you are not a fan of attaching geography tags to places and how you procure. I remember hearing one of your podcast episodes on that. But where are we in India to sort of manufacture or supply enough heavy engineering equipments to set up factories like this? What has been your experience?
So I've seen a massive transformation in the way all these companies are looking at India now. So there was a time in say maybe 2000s or early 2010s where India as a market did not really figure out in the minds of Western equipment manufacturers. And the reality of India was that because India is like a nation of nations, because of the states and the cultures that we have, there has not been cases where traditional Indian brands have all become national brands beyond a few that you could name on your hands. So the requirement of scale and manufacturing was something that was not needed in India because everything was localized and sold across the counter. So that's why the engineering in India did not demand that scale to scale up manufacturing, and which is where we ended up adopting more from the Western world because they knew how to scale up much faster than Indians did because that was the requirement then. But what I've seen is that because of the way the Indian economy is exploding right now and the way the consumption is supposed to drive, and we are looking at about 2.5 times increase in per capita income before the end of this decade in India. We are going to see a huge amount of disposable income in the hands of Indians. And that is why we see a lot of foreign manufacturers either setting up their own manufacturing plants in India or collaborating with Indian companies where there is a technology tie-up, where they are able to share the technology and the processes and get it done in India, where the Make in India initiatives have also been boosting them. So I see that there is more confidence in the way Indians are manufacturing. I see there is a lot of confidence in also the way that we are comfortable procuring equipment from Indian manufacturers nowadays. And I also see that the collaborative nature across the world, which did not exist maybe 10 years ago with India as a market, has improved. So everybody started taking the country more seriously, is what I would say.
Mm. Yeah, like you said, there are very few pan-Indian players. Maybe Haldiram comes to mind, Unilever comes to mind. But for a company, for a regional snack-based company like yourself, or maybe a Sri Krishna Sweets down in the south, Adayar Anand Bhavan down in the south, for such region-centric snack brands to scale up to like a Mondelez or like a Mars, what is the gap? Is it their solid distribution system? Is it the generous funding that they have to scale up to maybe go global? What do you think will take regional brands to come to that level?
Well, so I think that lacuna probably existed a few years ago when we were not exposed to the systems and the standards that were there. And then, as I said, Indian retail till the advent of e-commerce and 5G was more about personalized and across the counter. So it grew at a comfortable CAGR. So there was no need for them to distribute or get out. And these foreign brands like HUL or Unilever or Procter and Gamble, all of these understood the distribution game in the 50s itself. So they've been doing that as an idea from a lot earlier than many regional brands understood at one time. And I think the other big thing was the ambition and also the visibility of the market. So, because Western businesses at time, I think, understood that setting up business in new country was something that they did very well for many years before Indian businesses started doing that. The way the process and the systems were ingrained into Western businesses was much more hardcore or hard drained than what Indian businesses were. And I think a lot of Indian business culture was about trust and the face value of the person, because it was all regional and reputation mattered more than the systems and the process. So, as that change in consumer mindset, where the trust is sometimes let go for convenience or such small things, the way Indian brands will grow will change. And I think that is what is reflective of why they are investing now in processes, systems, adopting not just the technology and standards, but also the people from larger organizations who are helping them shape businesses which are more consumer focused, more safety focused, and something that deliver the same systems and quality assurance that what a traditionally globalized multinational would deliver.
Mm. So you still think that, maybe raising capital or going public or going the franchisee model need not be the best way to scale up. You can still scale up by being a family business. I mean, Mars is a family business when we speak about it, right?
So I think what I would say is that where raising capital or going public also helps is in terms of putting in some sort of pressure on the promoter family to formalize the business sooner than what they would want to do. So it is a choice that the promoter family needs to make. But very often, because of the conservative nature of Indian families, and where we have a society where disparity is so high, very often many family businesses are cash rich. And that's why they rather like playing on debt or playing on internal accruals, or rather than going to markets. And I think that is also changing because of the way the startup ecosystem in India is growing. So with that as a comparative, nature against traditional family business, I'm sure Indian businesses will be more outward looking than what they were before.
Excellent. You were talking about, we just discussed about scaling up and going international. I think with heavy mechanization and heavy investment, it is also important to market the products extremely well. And, Chitale having been in the industry for 80 plus years, I'm sure the company as a whole or the family would have seen marketing change, right, over the years. So from print or radio to maybe television and now social media. I was actually looking up some of the ad campaigns with Jagu Baba and Harsha Bogle,
Yeah.
hilarious ads.
Yeah.
How do you see that landscape changing, and how have you adapted to just how society has evolved?
Well, so I think I'll talk about the consumption pattern here to sort of set the context on what has been the ethos of marketing at Chitale Bandhu. So, as a brand, till the longest amount of time, our face business was always the store business. And the way the transaction happened was where the consumer came to the store and we sold the consumer products across the counter. So, that way the exchange was always direct. So, when that moved to franchising, we probably lost direct access to the consumer because the franchisee owner talked to the consumer, but he was a representative of the brand. But then when we got into the distribution business, where our consumers are now spread across 10 states or 35 countries, we are not necessarily knowing where the consumer is buying all the time at all. And that is where brand share becomes a very important part of the marketing mindset, and where you as a brand need to be at the top of the mind share for them to make a purchase. So that way, for a brand where we not advertise beyond, say, traditional festivals in newspapers for the longest amount of times, or maybe say 70 years out of 75, it needed a change which was more of a evolutionary rather than a revolutionary one. And that is why we first set out doing more focus on the brand value and the brand communication point, where for at least 2 years, we did not really talk about the product at all, but we talk more about what Chitale brand is. And you'll probably see that with the digital ads that are there on our YouTube channel as well, where we've talked more about the bonding, the culture, the tradition, the idea of sharing, the idea of accumulating the family and actually sharing the joy around it, and how we as a brand is something who's an accessory to the promotion of joy. And we sort of set that image up first before we actually started talking product, because otherwise we would have just become one more product company where all we are talking about is A, B, C products. And in that time, we ended up setting up our distribution where we were quite confident that if we spend money in a digital format or in a ATL or a BTL format or something which is print, we will be able to get the right ROI on it. Because the measurement of marketing capital is very crucial, because otherwise, you can build great brands and not reflect into sales, then it's of no use. So, how do we move from brand to product marketing was a transition that took 3 years. But now we've sort of figured out, and where the first campaign was about Harsha Bhogle and Jackie Shroff and Ratna Patak that you got to see. So the idea around it came that, Bakarwadi was our driver product, as you know, and that way that is something that people in other states would also know about. And that way, that was also an important transition for us to move from talking in Marathi to talking in Hindi or talking in more regionalized languages which are other than our home mother tongue. And while doing that, the driver product became the hook, and we started talking where the adoption was at times better because hey, Jackie Shroff is in that ad, so this brand must be doing well. So we got maybe 20 more counters per day in Gujarat than what would have happened before that. Or with Harsha Bhogle, we got a good enough validation where these faces who have better validation across the country than a regional brand like ours help us actually get new markets. And that is where now you'll see in the next 2 or 3 months even more stronger communication mechanism where we talk products, we talk call to actions, and we actually prompt consumers to make sale now rather than just be affiliated to the brand. So that is the transition that is happening there.
How has your adoption changed over time in South Indian states?
So I think South Indian states have always treated us with a lot more warmth than many other brands who sometimes come from the north.
And maybe it's the Bombay or Maharashtra effect, because a lot of South Indians did immigrate to Bombay and Pune back in the day, right?
So culturally, I think I've seen that there has always been this connect because of the Maratha Empire with the South till a certain hemisphere comes into the picture. So many things in pattern are similar. Maybe the texture changes. Like, in Marathi or Hindi, we say like kurkurit, kuskushit, kurkurit, which is like, crispy, crunchy, and, flaky. But the same product could be highly crispy in one part of India and it could be highly crunchy in other part. And that way the product might be the same, but the taste buds would be slightly different. So adopting to that was where I think we found naturally more affinity with the South than what we found with the North first. The North is something that we've just started developing, and I think the Bangalore market helped. And along with that, I would also say is that the IT industry in India helped, because Pune, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, all of them being IT hubs, there was a lot of cross migration between these cities where the food became a good culture to market. And because of that, maybe some office in Pune by some software company had somebody from Tamil Nadu who had spent time here for 2 months, or some Punekar had spent time in Karnataka for 4 months to train at one IT company. And they sort of promoted that exchange where the demand came up. And that's where I think we naturally aligned with them first. And now we've started going north.
Yeah, I think the case has been quite similar to me for me as well, because my aunts and uncles who used to live in Bombay, whenever they came back to Kerala for vacation, they would have kakra and bakarwadi from Chitale Bandhu. So that's sometimes the first exposure to
Correct.
a different diaspora to a snack, right? Excellent. So Chitale Bandhu does milk based products or mithai and also namkeens. And I have had this question in my mind for the longest time. How do you guys scale up during Diwali? Because Diwali is the time, or maybe Ganesh Chaturthi, these are the times when the sales are at their peak, right? People are gifting each other sweets. And unlike software, where scaling up and down is relatively easy, doing the same in a production environment or a manufacturing industry is extremely difficult, especially the food industry, because you have livestock, you have agriculture, all of that has to magically synchronize. How does this whole scaling up during Diwali happen, and what are some of the challenges that you face?
So I will break it down to the period of Chaturmas, not just Diwali. But Chaturmas is something that starts with Shravan, where Raksha Bandhan would be the first festival, and goes on to Diwali, which is like end of Diwali. These 4 months are the holiest months of the Hindu calendar, and that way, what we end up doing in sales in that quarter would be equivalent to what we end up doing sales in the first 2 quarters of the year. So that's why, just like how it is with Black Friday, where the book starts showing black instead of red, that is the history of it. The Chaturmas is where I think the tides turn for all Indian businesses, and we mostly aim for that. So with that in mind, what we have to do is that we have to create capacity which is good enough to cater the peak load of that season. And especially from Maharashtra, Ganpati to Diwali is the peak season, which is 2 months. So in that, one thing is of course automation. The second thing is also a lot of emphasis on packaging, where rather customers nowadays, with the risk of adulteration that happens because of the lack of scaling up, customers have started preferring packaging more than buying loose, simply because they are of the opinion that if this is tested and if it is found faulty, these guys will be answerable to the law. And that's why I think the demand for packaging has shot up so exponentially that we were lucky enough to invest into that sector a little earlier than most of our industry peers, and we stand to get the benefits of it. But along with that, I think the big change has also been in about how we see data, how we plan for our data and accruals, and how we also anticipate how efficiently we utilize our production. And also then boils down to the fact that there is like the last quarter of the year, especially post Sankranti in India going up to Holi, which is also the exam season and last financial year quarter of the year, everybody's spending goes down. So we probably end up having almost 1.5 shift at times empty for production. So then we plan our production in a manner where our shifts are designed to accommodate peak load as well as minimal load. And that way, the difference between the two should not be more than 50% is what we try to do. So that way, Q1, Q2, we probably are about 70 to 75% of our capacity. Q3, we probably have demand of about 120. We'll try to do about 100% of it. And that way, Q4 will be at about 60%. And that way, this transition or tides is something that we have to manage. And that is the part of operational efficiency that we try to focus into. And then at times create capacity where the linkage of sales is around this as well.
You mentioned about operational efficiency and efficiency improvement, right? And this whole push for automation and Industry 4.0 is the talk of the town. When you move from a manual process to automation, do you see a lot of pushback from workers, and how do you deal with that? Decision making.
So there was a time when we did face that, but I think now the current decade, what I've seen is that the workers have kind of understood that sometimes automation actually makes their life easy. So in India, when we say automation, what we do is not about eliminating workforce. It is about reducing the risk of workforce. Because manual error is something that we wish to avoid more than reduce the cost of labor per se, which is more often a challenge in Western countries, for example. So that's why very often automation is something that actually empowers the workforce in a manner where their quality of work life is actually better than what it used to be when it used to be about pure manual hard work. So reskilling of the workforce becomes an essential task. And what I've seen is that nowadays, with the advent of touchscreen phones, operating HMIs is something that is now very natural to the workforce of today. So even a 12th pass person will be able to operate a touchscreen with a reasonable amount of training. And rather, reskilling them is what we invest into, where we are rather able to create the managers of the future in the plants and actually create employment at the rural level where our plants are and retain that manpower there itself where their quality of life besides work is also better. So we rather emphasize this point, and that is something that our unions, our workforce have come to understand and appreciate. And rather, there is sometimes there is demand that more people want to work here, more people want to intern here, and I think we take that as a grateful measure that whatever we are doing is being appreciated.
Oh, that is fantastic. I also wanted to touch upon selling in India versus export. I did this great episode with lawyer Murali Neelakandan, who worked a lot in pharma industry. He worked for Cipla for the longest time, and he was mentioning about how pharma industry is not regulated. There is a lot of adulteration. There is not a lot of quality control. And sometimes it lies in the hands of corporate to have some sort of a responsibility and ethics to bring out the highest quality products to the customers. And I've heard you talk about how you use groundnut oil and where you could have come up with other substitutes to bring down the price, but you did not. So tell me a bit about maintaining the highest quality, and do you see any difference in the so-called export quality versus what you sell in India, or do you sell the same quality of products everywhere?
So I wouldn't say there is a difference in the product that is manufactured. Sometimes there is a difference in the ingredients from a regulatory perspective. Like Europe, for as an entire market, does not allow any milk product from India to be sold there. So we can't really sell our mango burfi there. We have to sell a different mango burfi product which is dry fruit based, not milk based. So that way, this regulatory change sometimes prompts us to have different recipes, but per se, the product that is cooked does not really change.
Sorry to pause there, but did the European Union give a rationale as to why milk-based products from India?
Well, so there are complicated reasons to it, but okay. I think one of the big reasons to it is that milk is an important business lobby in Europe as well, and that way it is also a very important source of income for Indian farmers. So Indian government is very protective about not letting other countries' milk products come to India, because that will disrupt the farmer pricing in India. So when India is protecting its market, there are other countries who say that if you don't open the market for us, we will not open it for you. And I think I'm not complaining, because it is very important that the Indian farmers are protected at this time being, because they are the most vulnerable set of the community at this moment.
Yeah, thanks to climate change as well, that is affecting quite a bit.
Yeah, because they're self-employed and not regulated, so which is a very, very high risk sector. So the more stability we give to the farmers as businesses, as ecosystem, I think the better it gets.
Okay, so that's not as bad as I thought. Okay.
No. So no complaint for it. I think coming back to it, when it comes to export, what changes is the packaging material. So in India, no matter how great your packaging material is, the customer rationale is still very accustomed to buying fresh. So you'll not buy a 6-month-old product, even though the shelf life is 1 year. And then the replenishment cycles in India are also very faster. So very often we don't need that high quality packaging in India, because a 4-month shelf life is more than enough for the market in India. And that shelf life, very often, unlike in Western countries, is not for the consumer. It is for the retailer to be protected that, hey, I have 4 months to sell the product, so let me not worry about the product not getting sold and getting expired. With the export market, sometimes the shipping itself takes 60 days. So the product to reach the shelf is about 75 days from the date of manufacturing. So with that, you need shelf life, which is about a year. And that cannot be achieved with the same packaging materials which can be used in India. And they are more expensive. And that is where I think that distinction is what we do. But that's where I think the distinction stops, because you don't need a one-size-fits-all strategy around it. And I think coming to the point where the lawyer that you spoke to, who talked about Cipla, I think this has been part of the Indian business DNA, I would say, in terms of doing something which is more ethically sound. So it's not natural that if you see large businesses in India, be it regional, national, they are always have a very high principled approach to them. So they will not talk too aggressively about top lines or bottom lines, but they'll talk about ethics and values more importantly, because that is what built trust in the market where the speed of justice delivery is not very high. So we've seen that improve pretty fast. And I think just like what the pharma industry did, I think even the food and beverage industry has been doing that. Where in India, many of us, the mithai and namkeen manufacturers actually ended up coming together and form a regulatory mechanism where that became a category in the food safety standards of India. So till 2018, this did not exist as a category, and the way Indian mithai was being judged was also not on Indian parameters. So now it is actually being judged in a fair manner, and these standards are being set. Now, of course, the larger players are the ones who will be under the scrutiny the most because they are exposed more. And we are willing to put up to that scrutiny simply because that will help formalize our industry better. So the milk industry, the mithai and namkeen industry, these are all massive industries, but probably 60 to 70% unorganized and very hyper local. So the branded business of it is just about 30 to 40 odd percent, which you get to see. So our upside is that, we'll see more brands becoming accepted as Indian economy grows and more conscious buyers coming in as there is more disposable income and better education in India. So that's why there will be a shift from unorganized to organized and more systemized approach in India. And this is a transition that we are witnessing since 2018. And I think it will become even stronger with the help of so many mediums that are educating the consumer now.
Wow, that's an eye opener because I did not know about this whole regulation that the top mithai and namkeen players have come together to set up. So that's a very important information. Indraneel, before we end this podcast, I wanted to touch on the idea behind healthy eating and veganism. It has started to become like a movement, and fair enough, they have their own reasons, but how do you see this going? Because there are so many players that have come up with quote unquote healthy snacking, while there are reports that India is the diabetes capital of the world. Maybe it is genetics, maybe it is lactose intolerance in the majority of the population, or maybe it's just sedentary lifestyle and the eating habits. So how important is it for a snacking company to innovate and come up with products to cater to this? And how do you in general see the health and habits of an average Indian?
Well, so I think the stats are there. As a developing country, we have more deaths thanks to heart diseases than we have due to cancer, and which is a very big anomaly to showcase the kind of health that Indians are having. And along with that, we also now are looking at becoming the diabetic capital of the country, of the world. Sorry. So that reflects that probably the choices of food that we are eating are not reflective of the lifestyle that has evolved for the Indians. So we must understand that in the last maybe 40 to 50 years, particularly, and since the liberalization in the 90s, the lifestyle of an average Indian has evolved very dramatically. Where at one time we were predominantly a village-based economy, and where farming and working hard physically was the norm of the day, and where people would even take the effort to cycle to work. Now, I think everything has evolved into a more stationary aspect of life. And we are working long. Our growth is also making us subject to congestion, pollution, and so many other stresses which are beyond our control, but part of the growing pains of an economy. So, amidst this, I do see that there are more upwardly mobile Indians who are making conscious choices about what they eat. And I think the big constraint with India is that the cost of nutrition in India is too expensive. And as a nation, we are highly malnutrition for kids below age 8. So that's something that we've been working on as a cause as well. Because what we see is that the healthier the children, the better their health and their longevity as well. And amidst all of this, one of the easiest fix is fixing your diet. So, of course, does diet fixing only help your lifestyle? No. But can it help incrementally? It does. Along with that, can you work out better? Yes, you can probably. Along with that, can you be a little more active? Probably yes. So, all of these are incremental steps which I think Indians will start doing more and more as things improve and things start getting better. And when that happens, we don't want to be a brand where we don't have that choice for our consumer. Rather, we want to enable that choice in our consumer window, no matter how big or small it is, because the choice has to be with the consumers, not with what the mandate or the health mandate comes around. It is about empowering the consumer with different choices that, hey, you are in the mood for celebration, we have something that you can indulge into. You want to get into a strict mechanism, we have sugar free sweets which will not disturb your keto diet as well. Or we have snacks which are something that are probably, so we are right now working extensively on air frying. We are looking at reducing the percentage of oil in our products by about 20%. So all of these factors are something that we are just making sure that our consumers have a choice of incrementally improving what they consume. I don't think so. Preaching anything particularly is something that we can do. But as a food company, I believe it is our right that we improve the quality of nutrition for every gram that we sell. So what are we doing for that is where I think the big question as a top of management comes into the mind. And that is where I think our R&D has been focused, our marketing has been focused, also the kind of brands and sub brands we are creating for these healthier choices is focused. And I think it will grow. But particularly, I think because Indian population is where we have about maybe I think 70% population who is predominantly vegetarian. I think the vegan mechanism or the vegan ideology is something that has not really blown out of proportion in India yet, because we are naturally closer to what they do besides consuming dairy, maybe for that example. So that's why I think the trends in India will be slightly different, but nonetheless, they will be about making better choices, and the financial inclusion will make sure that people make better choices. So when they do that, we want to be the brand which helps them make better choices, and that is what we want to position us to.
Fantastic. Well, Indraneel, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for giving us such amazing insights, not just about the history of Chitale Bandhu, but about how you look at the market, what you see the gaps are in going international, and some of the challenges that you face as a company and your path forward. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.